The bad guy in Hollywood. From the silver screen's early days, he's played a major role in the success of the American cinema, giving evil a human form.
In the name of Allah, I kill you all!
The reality is, good villains can mean big box office.
When you say Nazis, you pretty much know what their agenda is.
People like to watch villains because it creates drama.
But are the bad guys spreading intolerance or discrimination?
It just seems like the villains are always of some ethnicity. The Italians are always related to the mafia, and Arabs are always related to terrorists.
The fire of Allah. You know, you're like, and the casting director's like, that was great.
Is Hollywood merely giving the public what it wants?
They no longer look at color or race. They see green. It's all about money.
Questions at the heart of casting calls.
In the name of Allah, I kill you all!
In the name of Allah, I will kill you. That's my trademark. I kill you in the name of Allah.
Actor Saeed Badreya has made a career out of playing the Arab villain.
I kill you all.
So it's hardly a stretch for him to brandish a gun on the set of his latest movie. Only now he's trying to explode the very stereotype he had a part in creating. With the help of some high-powered Hollywood friends, Peter and Bobby Fairley, who directed Something About Mary, Saeed's making T for Terrorist. The film takes the typical action movie with its stock Arab bad guy and turns it on its head.
T for Terrorist is about an Arab-American actor, sick and tired of playing a terrorist role.
It's almost the story of Saeed's own life as an actor. From Executive Decision to The Insider to Three Kings, Badreya has portrayed the cliché-ridden bad Arab.
Hi, this is Saeed. We talked like a week ago about Tony Shalhoub.
Though he's racked up an impressive list of credits, Badreya had hoped for more in Hollywood. Growing up in Egypt, he took refuge from poverty and war in theaters, watching American movies and good guy heroes like John Wayne.
I came here because the magic of cinema.
But since attending New York University Film School, he has made his bread and butter playing the Arab menace.
Every movie I held a gun. Sometime when I'm a doctor, they ask me, you want a gun?
Mark.
His terrorist roles wear thin for even his most loyal audience.
My kids always, told me, when are you gonna be a nice guy? And I believe a lot of roles as a terrorist, and a lot of people get bothered by that.
That's the right look. Yeah.
Badreya's kids aren't the only ones who complain, and since 9/11, those complaints have gotten worse.
In every film, you have to have good and evil. It's just that we've never let go of this bad guy, number one. And this bad guy we hate now more than we ever hated.
Dr. Jack Shaheen has been studying the portrayal of Arabs in cinema for more than 20 years.
The Arab stereotype has been with us ever since movies started cranking.
His book, Real Bad Arabs, is a catalog of about 900 of what he calls the best and worst roles depicting Arabs. Among the top offenders, Executive Decision.
What the films did were to portray all Arabs as subhuman and to portray Islam as a faith of violence, because in almost every one of these films, when a Muslim would pray, the prayers would be followed by violence. So what Hollywood has done is it's focused primarily on the lunatic fringe.
And Shaheen says Hollywood has tended to denigrate all Arab characters, even those who aren't toting guns.
I think the most damaging film ever to come out of Hollywood is Rules of Engagement. A 2001 movie showing an African-American hero Samuel Jackson Jr. gunning down 83 Arab women, children, and men. In True Lies, Arnold Schwarzenegger guns down Palestinians as like they're Cupid dolls in an amusement park.
For many Muslims, films like The Siege, which seem to equate their faith with violence, are more chilling.
There will never be a last film.
Executives in Hollywood say they're not creating or reinforcing stereotypes. They're just looking for stories and characters that will sell. Frequently, that means feeding off of current events and the country's mood.
I don't think it is unreasonable after 9/11 to suggest that if there was a group with an atomic bomb loose in the United States, would be an Arab terrorist group from overseas. I mean, it's just a matter of what's in the newspapers. So there's a desire to be relevant.
They're definitely going to have parallels with what's happening in the real world, but we take the situations and the stories that we think are interesting to write and hopefully to watch and push them as far as we can.
Playing off the news has helped turn the TV series 24 into a hit. But featuring Arab terrorist characters has generated criticism that the show's creators are exploiting a harmful stereotype.
Interests that want the United States to go to war with the Middle East.
There are villains of all, colors, creeds, races, nationalities, whatever out there. To say they can't ever tell a story where a villain is like some of the villains are in real life is, to me, crazy. That's not the world we live in. Those aren't the stories people want to hear.
Is that okay?
Absolutely, have fun with it.
Saeed Badreya accepts this reality for now, and he says complaints or protests alone won't change how Arabs are portrayed on screen.
You don't fight the system in Hollywood. You become part of the system, so you can change it from inside.
Scene 3, Charlie, take 2. Mark.
In his latest project, Badreya is acting and producing.
Abdul, you need to be more aggressive.
Working to change the prevailing image of the Arab by pushing it to an extreme for comic effect.
Show me anger. No.
Saeed plays a frustrated Arab actor who reaches his breaking point after a director drives him too hard.
Show me hate. Now, can you do that for me?
Sure.
Okay.
I guess.
No! Do not guess! Do it!
I do it, I'm sorry. I thought the idea of 5-6 years ago, while I was playing in a movie, Executive Decision, and I was one of the hijacker, and I had the gun, and I was inside doing the scene, and I thought, why not become the hero and let the American guy be the terrorist?
It's a plot twist that flies in the face of a century of cinema stereotypes. That history when we return. The year is 1915. The Birth of a Nation unspools at the cinema. One of the first full-length silent films ever made, it depicts the Ku Klux Klan's rise in the South following the Civil War, as they do battle against vicious and recently freed African-American slaves. Today, director D.W. Griffith's controversial 3-hour epic is seen as helping give birth to racist stereotypes in Hollywood.
There he depicted slaves in a way that would make you cringe today if you saw it. And in fact, when they play it, people do almost literally cringe.
When it was released, The Birth of a Nation was projecting on screen deep-seated fears that had long divided America.
You go back to Birth of a Nation, which is basically about a black man about to sort of touch a white woman. And that's what it comes down to still. It's a real literal fear of blood mixing. And that's where stereotypes come from, this threat to the pale American skin that scares everybody still. The most frightening creatures in movies, when they weren't King Kong, were always dark-skinned people, be they Africans or Arabs.
The silent movie The Sheik was one of the first to portray Arabs as mysterious, oversexed, and dangerous.
If you were an Arab, you were some scary person who spouted some babble that wasn't understandable, and you were probably violent.
Native Americans were one of the group's most often typecast, like in 1923's The Covered Wagon.
If you were a Native American, you were violent and prone to try to steal land and want to rape white women.
Cartoons of the era helped reinforce racial stereotypes.
If you were a black person, you were lazy and shiftless.
African Americans were also portrayed as docile and childlike. These images leapt out from the screen even in the most popular films, including Gone with the Wind.
I don't know nothing about birthing babies. What do you mean?
If that's not promoting stereotypes still and a certain kind of American hegemony, I don't know what is.
The tradition is very strong. And part of the problem is, if I were to indict Hollywood, it would be for being lazy or for taking the easy way out or perpetuating bad habits. For a long time, since Birth of a Nation, as a movie, stereotyping has been used to control the population to a great extent.
The current treatment of Arabs on screen resembles the way the Japanese were portrayed during World War II.
My name's Joe Tatsuiko.
In films like Across the Pacific.
Sure glad there's someone around that speaks my language.
And again in cartoons of the time.
General Hama demonstrates coolness and calmness of a Japanese officer during air raid.
The greatest double cross in history. Our great Pacific outpost in the Hawaiian Islands is ruthlessly bombed.
The bombing of Pearl Harbor was to the Japanese what the terrorist attacks of September 11 were to the Arabs, a traumatic event that transformed them into the ultimate villain.
Death and destruction unleashed on a nation at peace as Japan's perfidious declaration of war.
During a time of conflict, we demonize the enemy, and Hollywood helps us in that way and also hurts us. It's a very natural thing.
But when you got Germans who speak military German is very harsh and guttural, you know, and it's easy to say that's a bad guy. You go a lot of hawking and spitting, you know, and the Japanese the same way, you know.
The horror in newsreels soon gave birth to despicable big-screen enemies, as in 1943's Bataan.
A war is not a time when you see a lot of shades of gray. Things are done in kind of stark contrast because people, if there's a sacrifice to their lives, need to have kind of good and evil delineated for them in a very clear way.
The problem with that is, how do you then turn it around? How do we then come to terms with the fact that they're really human beings? How do you get over that kind of rabid hatred?
And throughout World War II, popular films helped brand all Japanese, including those living in the U.S., as the enemy. In an atmosphere of fear and suspicion, even those who were American citizens were rounded up and placed in internment camps. Yet not everybody in Hollywood believes their industry wields such power. As far as Lionel Chetwynd is concerned, the industry shouldn't be held accountable.
Nobody, not the audience, not those of us that are involved in making it, or those that are involved in observing it, should pay too much attention to how we depict anyone, or to what we depict, or what our opinions are. I think it's really important that the American people and everybody understand that Hollywood is essentially a commercial enterprise.
There's a little bit of truth in every stereotype. Ethnic groups have individual characteristics. They just do. And to pretend that they don't is silly. To harp on the same ones all the time is boring and probably hurtful to the people in that group because it doesn't show them as a whole.
Often the marketplace itself helps eliminate the ethnic stereotypes. When they're overused, they become boring. Or with the passage of time, attitudes change. Native Americans have gone from the savage redskins to sage ecologists in Little Big Man.
There is an endless supply of white men, but there always has been a limited number of human beings.
And Good Samaritans in Dances with Wolves. And the stereotypical Italian mobsters of Little Caesar have evolved into the more complex, conflicted characters in the Corleone family.
And my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract. That's my family, kid. It's not me.
Even the evil Russians have evolved on screen.
We've had the Russians, of course, during the Cold War. They were perfect villains. If you saw Rocky IV, you know what I'm talking about.
I must break you.
There, the hero, Sylvester Stallone, is up against the huge Russian who dwarfs him. And the Russian, at one point in the movie, is attached to machines because he's a kind of extension of the machine. He's just this brute force, and we're supposed to identify with the human up against this, you know, undefeatable, indefatigable giant. Now it would be kind of ludicrous to have a Russian as a villain.
About the only villainous stereotype frozen in time is the Nazi.
Well, I can be reasonable.
That time is past.
Still going strong in the 1981 action-adventure Raiders of the Lost Ark and numerous other movies since.
Nazis have always been the universal villain.
I know you will.
When you say Nazis, you pretty much know what their agenda is.
Scene 10, Quail, take one.
Saeed Badreya doesn't want Arabs to get stuck in Hollywood's time machine, eternally playing the villains. Taking a cue from other actors and directors, he's telling his own story. For Badreya and actor Tony Shalhoub, best known for his work in the TV shows Wings and Monk, T for Terrorists is a labor of conviction, one they hope will point the way for more realistic roles for Arab Americans.
Arab American actors just haven't really had a voice, haven't really made their mark yet. There's been a real problem with profiling and stereotyping images of Arabs in television and film, certainly. And so, we're all trying to unravel those images.
When we come back, staring down the Arab stereotype and turning it on its head.
Mark. And action.
I'm taking over your set.
Over my dead body.
Fine with me.
This scene has played out so many times on screen it has become a cliché. A gun-wielding Middle Eastern fanatic terrorizes a group of innocent people.
You! Lock the door.
But on the set of Saeed Badreya's T for Terrorist, it's being played for ironic effect.
So, what do you want? Well, we'll finish making this movie.
As a filmmaker, Arabic-American filmmaker, my weapon is the camera. My weapon is the image. I am the storyteller. And instead of putting a gun in your head to listen to my story, I'm gonna tell it to you.
Tony bends down and washes his hands, right?
And Badreya's story is simple. After years of playing the bad guy, he's trying to take Hollywood's favorite one-dimensional portrait of evil and turn it upside down.
And then he comes back into this mirror. Yeah.
Into this mirror?
No, into the same mirror again.
His character in T for Terrorist has an epiphany when an angel, played by Tony Shalhoub, pays a visit to him in a washroom.
But I was sent here to give you some advice. You need to stand up for yourself once in a while. And this, my friend, is one of those times.
Are we ready? Okay.
Saeed Badreya is taking matters into his own hands.
Places!
In this pivotal scene, he turns the tables on Hollywood.
And you be the terrorist. I be the hero.
We need makeup and wardrobe and sound
When we come back, killing stereotypes with humor and future hopes for Arab Americans in Hollywood.
Mark.
In T for Terrorist, Saeed Badreya's fantasy comes true. He gets to be the hero, vanquish the terrorist, and he gets the girl.
Checking the gate.
I get the girl. I get the girl. I thought I would buy him. I have to produce to get the girl.
But winning the blonde isn't the only way to topple a decades-old Arab stereotype.
Scene 12, take 1. Action.
Saeed Badreya hopes Arab Americans can follow a similar course.
We have a lot of story to tell and make a lot of money, but we have to tell it. The American filmmaker will not make a good film about Sadat. I will not make a good film about Kennedy. So we say an Arabic word, leaves the bread to the baker. He can make it better. And someday we might tell a better story.
For Badreya, there's a measure of consolation in knowing the roles are reversed in the Arab world, where it's the American who is often stereotyped in movies such as the Egyptian hit Hello, America. It highlights the adventures of a couple who visit the U.S. and are shocked by what they learn of American values.
The American wife trying to dress Adila in American fashions. But, you know, she's uncomfortable with this. And of course, what's going to come out instantly is, you know, if you really want protection, you don't need a man, you need a pistol.
Just as cinema stereotypes can influence audiences in this country, they exert the same power internationally, too.
We're a violent society. We're materialistic. We can appear to be a very sexually amoral society, sometimes immoral. It can only reinforce that, and you know, give people a sense that you know what they are seeing is in fact real.
What is this? It's a script I wrote, and I know it needs a lot of work, but...
Saeed Badreya believes that portrayals of Arabs will improve, but only over time.
This is unbelievable. I never imagined in my life something like this will happen to me.
At the close of T for Terrorist, even his character's transformation turns out to be an illusion.
Get your ass out there before I have your part recast faster than you can say shish kebab.
In the end, it's a dream. T for Terrorist is a dream. He come back and he still have to deal with what is going on, and he have to put the beard on and shout, in the name of Allah, I will kill you all. So we left a message that dream is possible, but you have to work for it, and you have to work hard, and you have to be determined 100%. If not, you're not gonna be able to do it.
Ironically, the events of 9/11 may help rehabilitate the long-suffering image of Arabs on screen and force Hollywood to consider more complex portrayals of Arabs in the future.
You can't make a movie that says Arabs are villains anymore because it's too simplistic even for Hollywood. That just cannot be done anymore.
Other ethnic groups have fought the same battles as Arab Americans and succeeded, making Hollywood more diverse. Yet the Arab struggle for acceptance underscores an age-old question. Do movies shape public opinion, or does public opinion shape the movies?
The power of movies and television and the media in general is awesome. It's just overwhelming. It can really help shape what you think because it's your source of information. So it's power that should be used wisely.